Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some wild news coming out of the Washington Wizards camp. Riker, apparently they are ready to blow it up. They're ready to trade everyone, they're ready to make all the moves. That includes John Wall and Bradley Beal, obviously two multi-time All-Stars. What are your just immediate thoughts on this situation?
Well, something has to be done, and I think it should start with their coach.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to go.
Yep.
He's a fantastic coach. He did some great things in Oklahoma City, but unfortunately, he just doesn't have the proper attitude to get this lethargic, lackluster team out of whatever downward spiral that they're in now. And I think that they've left the organization, the management, with no other option. It's a baffling conundrum, really, that they have. This is a team that was top of the Eastern Conference, constantly touted as better than the Toronto Raptors, and by virtue of, comparable roster, they barely did anything besides trade away Marcin Gortat for, a worse center and Dwight Howard. But that it shouldn't take a team from top of the Eastern Conference to almost very bottom of the Eastern Conference. So it's time for them to do something. Will they get the result they want? Probably not. Who's going to take on John Wall's contract? I can't see any team wanting to take that huge hit to their overall salary. If anybody doesn't know, his contract, this crazy Supermax, kicks in next season. By 4 years from now, he's getting over $45 million a year. There's just a lot of X factors. They're going for the big tank. They're doing the true tank for Zion, tank for RJ. A lot to talk about here, though. We got a couple of gems that maybe we'll want to discuss.
Most definitely. And you mentioned it. The Wizards were constantly a top-tier team in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, last year they were the 8th seed, but that was mostly due to injuries, and they played really well against us in the playoffs, so they showed that they still had a lot of talent. They were still a solid team. But you mentioned it, they just completely spiraled to the bottom of the East this season. They're currently at a 5-11 record, and they really need to blow things up, especially with the big contracts they have on the books. But, as Raptors fans, and there's a lot of speculation amongst the Raptors community. Do you think that we could get Bradley Beal now that the Wizards are desperate for a tank? They're desperate to, move someone. And you mentioned it. People don't want John Wall. They don't want that big contract. Like, he's still a very good player, but he's not the guy.
He's all right. He's on the decline. He's looking fat this year. I mean, I'm going to be blunt about it. He looks chubby. He's always been the fastest player in the league, and that's where he creates most of his offense, is on the attack. He looks like he's lost his first step. And you mentioned it. You said that the Washington Wizards have always given the Raptors a little bit of trouble, and it's not the Wizards. It's Bradley Beal.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting. It's definitely interesting for those, not the fair weather fans of the Raptors Digest, but those who've been loyal to us, I guess, since the day one. Everybody should know how much you dislike Bradley Beal. So it's hilarious that we're having this conversation. But short answer to your question, can the Raptors get him? No, they can't. There's no plausible trade scenario that I can see that would benefit the Raptors. Of course, we make the argument that Bradley Beal would be the second best player on this Raptors team. We can maybe talk about that for a second. If we just look at his stats, 45% from the field. He's a 21 point per game guy, maybe a little bit more. 5 rebounds. His 3-point percentage has dropped a bit this year, but we're not even going to take this year into account because it's been weird for the Wizards.
It's been a mess.
They're not gelling. He just had an altercation today, I think, during practice, but he would certainly come in and be a strong point on the Toronto Raptors that they would like to have him. But the reason is because he is a man that's worth a lot of money as well. Not an absurd amount of money. I think he's getting paid adequately for an all-star in the East. The issue is, what pieces do the Raptors have to move? Any young guy that the Washington Wizards would want, which is because they're doing a rebuild now. They're going to want to start young. They don't want veterans. They don't have the money right now behind them, so they're going to have to give away a multiple pieces plus a big hitter to make the contracts match up. So we'll jump into it and we'll get a little bit weird and experimental.
Okay, would you just because Bradley Beal, you mentioned he's an all-star in the Eastern Conference. He's probably come in, especially where Lowry's been inconsistent. He's been great this year at times. The past couple weeks, he hasn't been too good. He probably would come in and be our second best player behind Kawhi. That's debatable, but he's a very talented guy. Would you be willing to give up some quality role players on the Toronto Raptors? So let's just say we made up a trade of Jonas Valanciunas, Fred VanVleet, and Norman Powell for Bradley Beal and maybe Jan Mahimi. Would you be considerate of a deal in that fashion?
It's impossible. It's impossible. Well, one that doesn't work, right? Because you're trading away $40 million in value, and you're only giving away or giving in return to the Washington Wizards, I think less than $25 million if I'm looking at the number, less than $20 million maybe, even if I'm looking at the numbers properly. Yamahimi is a very paid center, and I don't think that he's extremely
And
valuable.
CJ Miles.
Of course.
We'll throw in CJ Miles to make the salaries match.
No, that doesn't make any sense, really, because I'm an advocate. I'm a hard advocate for 8-man rotation for the Toronto Raptors. But if we can see now that, of course, I've been having to bite my tongue a little bit given the amount of injuries of late that the Raptors have had, so we've been going into that extended bench. Right, yep. So it's valuable to have those guys, or that 3-game losing streak by only a couple of points would have been a 5-game losing streak in blowout proportions. And the issue, too, is we can't deal away Van Vliet and DeLon. If there was some trade to happen, one of them needs to stay. That's the only way. The other issue is who backs up Jonas Valanciunas. I think it's fantastic that he's out of the starting lineup because he doesn't fit there. Nick Nurse has proven that Serge Ibaka or Pascal Siakam are the right fits for that starting lineup. But Jonas Valanciunas has been having his best season in terms of efficiency of his entire career. And I don't know if Greg Monroe is up to the challenge of replacing a guy that's who's still in his youth and having his best season.
That's a fair point, and you mentioned it. It's sacrificing depth for more star power, and we can't ignore the fact that Bradley Beal would come in and be an all-star, be a guy that would take over games when Lowry isn't cooking. He can be Kawhi Leonard's second guy to get a point for this team. But you mentioned it. Our bench has not been as strong as it has been last season this year. And a lot of that has to do with Fred VanVleet, as he was the captain of the bench mob last season. He brought the best out of every player. He brought the best out of, DeLon, CJ, Siakam last year, and Pirtle. And now that he's struggling a little bit, and a lot of that has to do with injuries and different things that's going on, we see how desolate our bench can be and has looked at times this year. So trading away Jonas, Norman and Fred, that's just a possible trade. You could replace CJ in there. Whether the Wizards would take that or not, that could be another discussion. But if we had to deal away 3 key bench pieces, we'd look pretty desolate behind our starting unit. Our starting lineup would look nice with Lowry, Beal, Kawhi, Siakam, and Serge, but our bench unit would just look completely more out of it than it does now. And you harp on the 8-man rotation, and you at least need 8 guys that can play. I don't know if we'd be able to put to the court 8 players in the playoffs if we just completely deteriorate our bench like this.
You know what? I'm looking back at it now. I'm looking at the rotation, who we would have left. And so we'd have Kyle, Beal, Lowry, Beal, Leonard, Ibaka, and Siakam. It's possible if you were to deal away both of the backup point guards, right? And was it Jonas Valanciunas as well?
Well, for right now, we'll say Jonas, Norm, and CJ. And we could replace CJ with Fred once the time limit, because Fred just signed his contract. So Fred can be traded, I think, mid-December. So we'll assume it's mid-December.
Okay. Right. Okay. So now we have, Danny Green now gets pushed to the bench, which is a fantastic bench piece to have.
Yep.
Greg Monroe, who's a veteran of the league and has played well in the burner minutes that he's played given.
Yep.
So that's not a horrible backup center to have. Mm-hmm. And then OG Anunoby, who's been coming into his own.
Yep.
That's not a bad 8-man rotation to have. And then Norman Powell, if you can get productivity out of him when he comes back.
Yeah.
Plus, you'd still have either DeLon or Fred VanVleet.
Yep.
That right there, that makes sense to me. That, if you save one point guard,
if you save
that
one
makes
point guard.
sense.
Okay.
But now, if you take out a point guard, or if you trade away both of them, now you're pushing Lorenzo Brown up into being backup a center piece, and the backup point guard needs to be the leader. You're not going to have Norman Powell be the leader of the bench mob, and you're not going to have Danny Green be the primary ball handler. Yep. That team, I don't know. I don't think that's a championship team. I think you need a solid backup point guard. I think that is the key piece of any championship team. The Golden State Warriors, Sean Livingston, or even Andre Iguodala playing that point. You can't get rid of those guys. I think if it was possible to keep one, it makes sense to do whatever it takes to get Bradley Beal, right?
Okay.
If that's getting rid of Jonas Valanciunas, if that's getting rid of, even you package up OG Anunoby and
Would you move OG in a Bradley Beal trade, in a hypothetical Bradley Beal trade?
I would, and you know why? Because what's more valuable? One season with the absolute maximum possibility to win a championship. Like, how much do you think that this lineup is the best lineup in the NBA? If you have Kyle Lowry, Bradley Beal, Kawhi Leonard, Serge Ibaka, Pascal Siakam, with backups of one of our point guards, Danny Green, and CJ or OG. We'll even think about just 7 men. If you're talking about one season to win a championship, do you not think that the addition of Bradley Beal with Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry playing at his best in assists, and Pascal Siakam's explosion, and Serge Ibaka playing at his best, is that not the best possibility to win a championship?
I think if we were to completely move away our depth, we see how the way the injuries have crippled us so far this season. How they have affected our team, right? If everyone stays healthy and everyone's great, then I think that's fair. I think if we had Bradley Beal inserted into the starting lineup and, we had those guys and we had a few of those, Danny Green, depending on who the packages is, we can't really do any trade machines till December and we see all the players that can be traded because it'd be very difficult to make a move now. But if we were to make those moves and have that overpowered starting lineup, I think that would be a very good thing for the playoffs, but we need to assure health in our backup players because, as you mentioned it, I don't think Lorenzo Brown can play important minutes for us. He's not reliable. He can't do anything like that. And, the Raptors, although we don't want, 11 people stealing minutes from each other, and especially in the playoff time, that doesn't really work, you still need to be able to give guys breathers. You still need to be able to have a bench that comes in as effective because you mentioned the Warriors. The Warriors have always... Andre Iguodala comes off their bench, right? They have a very strong bench presence. So,
yeah.
And
who's
if we
about
were to
400
trade
years old this season? Who's about 400 years old?
This is saying,
Okay,
yeah.
Finish your point.
Yeah, no. When the Warriors were most successful, when the teams that won championships, they've all had solid benches. So in order to make a trade, especially that involves OG, we need to be assured that we have a very strong chance of winning a championship. That's, because OG is our main future, right? We see the way that Pascal has elevated himself, and he's going to be a great piece moving forward into the coming years. OG is 3 years younger than Pascal. He has a lot going on off the court this season, and he's still playing. He still has looked much improved from last year. Yeah. I think OG has potential to be an all-star in this league. I don't want to sacrifice him for an incremental chance, an incremental improvement.
He has potential. He has potential, but it's not proven. And incremental is very rough to say when you're trading for probably the best shooting guard in the Eastern Conference right now. Is there a better shooting guard?
A better shooting guard?
In the Eastern Conference.
Depends what you classify Chris Middleton as. You can maybe make an argument.
He's a shooting guard, but Bradley Beal's better than Chris Middleton.
Maybe more talented, but I'd argue Chris Middleton has been very good this season, especially on the defensive end.
He's been having a good season. Yeah, he's longer. But anyways, point is, you're putting a number one or number two, depending upon your perspective here, shooting guard, match with the number one small forward, probably the number one or number two player in the Eastern Conference, if not a top player in the entire league. Top with Siakam, who will have a podcast soon, should he be an all-star. Top with, like I said, Kyle Lowry, who's playing his best season. I think his best all-around season. He's been having a little bit of struggles with the shooting. This is the best possible team you can gather, besides getting Giannis also on the team in the Eastern Conference, or maybe one of the guys from the 76ers, right? Mm-hmm. The best possible team. Now you're bringing in, where there's the uncertainty of Kawhi Leonard that he might leave.
Yep.
So you're almost assuring that you're putting a team around him that, if this is a one and done thing, you're putting around the best possible team to have 1 year with a fantastic player. And now you're bringing in a guy who's locked in on how long is his contract? I want to make sure that I'm educated here. At least another 2 years, right?
Yep. Yeah, Bradley Beal has 3 years left on his deal, including this season.
And then if we were to get rid of OG Anunoby, you're getting rid of a guy who I, of course, 100% believe that he's a good player. But to be the devil's advocate, he hasn't proven that he's going to be an all-star. He hasn't even proven he's going to hang around in the league for,
I think
5
he's proven
more seasons.
I think he's proven that he's going to be hanging around the league. If he doesn't improve at all, he's a player that would definitely start on most NBA rosters.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's a 10-point-a-game guy that has no ball handling right now, right?
It's looking
ball
much
handling from last
improved
season.
this year.
And he's coming back from a big injury. But the point is we're just because we're Raptors fans, just because we're high on OG Anunoby, there's no way you can possibly say that he's going to be an all-star. There's no way you can possibly even say close that he's going to be the face of the franchise.
You can't assure that. I don't think it's impossible to say that he can be that.
You can make an argument for it, but it would have to be based on all hypotheticals.
Obviously.
Right? Because he's not proven anything.
No, I see where you're coming from.
Except for his defense.
Yep.
And the thing is, like I said, now you're bringing in a guy who you're sure to have locked in. You're sure if Kawhi Leonard leaves, then he's at least an enticing piece to bring more players in or to put more players around him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That you will at least have a good team for another 2 years if you can keep, Siakam, or you have Siakam. If you keep Siakam and you keep Bradley Beal and Lowry's still locked in. I think it's, you're taking a situation that's pretty fragile with the Toronto Raptors, and you're adding a piece then that makes it at least a contender, well, not a contender amongst the Eastern Conference for the next season or two, regardless of what happens with Kawhi Leonard. And then on top of that, you're providing the opportunity to win a championship this season because of the collapse that we've so far seen with the Golden State Warriors. Of course, when Curry comes back, they're going to win every game for the most part.
That's how it goes.
But this is a team that they have challenges. It's not completely unforeseeable that some team in the Eastern Conference, whatever team makes it to the championships, will be able to contend with them. So I think if it was possible. But let's swing it over and let's talk about what does Washington want? What do they want to blow up their team? The chips are all in their hands except for John Wall. I think they're screwed with him. They're not going to get rid of him.
They'll move him if they have a chance. They'll move him if they have a chance. But
they'll fleece the New York Knicks, but that's the only team that I can think of.
The Kings
what
are always
do you think
out there,
they
Riker.
want?
Never forget about the Sacramento Kings, Riker. Come on.
Right.
We gave them Rudy Gay.
That's true as well. That is true. Do they want to assemble the worst possible team? Is that what is it that the Washington Wizards want to achieve from saying that their entire roster is open for trade?
Frankly, the Washington Wizards have a lot of talent on their team. That's inarguable. They have, whether it's overpaid or not, they have a lot of good players. So they'd have to really just completely do a fire sale if they wanted to, tank for RJ, tank for Zion. So it's going to, we obviously don't have connections in the Washington locker room or anything like that, but they aren't doing that too well now. And if they're going to trade John Wall, obviously John Wall is going to be tough to trade. So I don't see them being a worse team in the NBA for a sustained period of time with John Wall on their roster. I don't see you being bad enough to get the first overall pick. You need to be very bad to get the first overall pick. So maybe they try and move Bradley Beal because he's the only piece with value and try and get role players around John Wall, Otto Porter, Markieff Morris that fit and try and retool the roster rather than blow it up. Or maybe they just find a way to move John Wall's contract in a salary dump, completely get rid of everything, and tank for RJ. That might be the move.
There's no way they're looking to retool if they're saying that.
But that might be their only option. Because do you agree that if John Wall's on their roster, they're not going to be a bottom 5 NBA team?
What? Can you reframe the question?
If John Wall's on their roster, they're not going to be a bottom 5 NBA team.
They are not going to be. So if they keep him, you think that they will become better than bottom 5?
Yep, better than bottom 5.
If they keep him and get rid of Bradley Beal?
Yes. Just a team with John Wall on it and, NBA players. John Wall with NBA players. I don't see that team being the worst team in the NBA or a bottom 5 team.
This out of shape, not as good, on the decline John Wall. I don't have confidence in him after his first 16 games this season to elevate any NBA team. Because we talk about the individual talent, and of course I started this podcast by saying that the coaching, I think, is a big issue here. Otto Porter looks dead out there. He gets no touches on the ball. He's by far their best three-point shooter, and he's not getting shots up.
But do you think with John Wall, they could be the worst team in the NBA? They could possibly get the first pick, because it's going to be tough to move him.
Oh, okay. This is your question.
Yeah.
Can they tank and still have John Wall?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They'd have to try to tank.
Exactly. Because I think they might have to. They might be forced. Because it's not looking up for Washington right now, but they might be forced to try and retool this roster instead of blow it up because they're locked into that John Wall contract. So maybe if we, because we aren't going to offer anything that is going to supply a tanking team. We don't have any young raw prospects. most of our young prospects can be a solid role player on current NBA teams. So if we were to make a move with Fred VanVleet, Jonas, and one of our wings, then that's going to improve. I think that would improve the Washington's team, as we're giving them 3 very solid players, and then we'd get Bradley Beal in return. So,
I mean, it's an unfortunate situation for Washington. If you think about it, I just don't see what the market is for any of these teams. And if we look at it, who do they want? Do they want Jonas Valanciunas? No, I don't. Why would they want Jonas Valanciunas? They have Dwight Howard.
Well, they'd have depth. Dwight Howard's. They'd have a more all-around team. That's Washington's issue. They've always just had John Wall, Bradley Beal. Otto Porter's been okay. Markieff Morris is okay at times. Marcin Gortat, they're all up and down. They look very good against the Raptors because the Washington Wizards. No, but this
is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Is Dwight Howard's their starting center, right? So you can push him into the reserve. But if you trade for Jonas Valanciunas, which is really the only guy that we can see flexible enough with a big enough contract to match up with Bradley Beal, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not getting rid of Kyle. We're not getting rid of Serge. We're not getting rid of Danny Green. Nobody wants Norman Powell. So Jonas Valanciunas that would have to be the trade, right?
Yeah.
They can't get rid of Jan Mahimi. He's on $16 million for 2 years.
Well, because the hypothetical trade that I brought up is Jonas Valanciunas, Norman Powell, and Fred, once he's eligible to be traded, for Bradley Beal and Jan Mahimi.
I don't think that trade matches up.
Yeah, it matches up. It's successful in the trade machine.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, gosh. Accepting Jan Mahimi would just be garbage.
Yep.
But all I'm saying is, from around the rest of the league, Otto Porter Jr., I mean, maybe people realize the potential of Otto Porter Jr. You can see that if you watch any game that he's being underutilized. But $26 million. My God, that's your star player's contract right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's a third best player on the team, fourth best player on the team of the worst team in the second worst team in the Eastern Conference, right? Jan Mahimi on this crazy contract. Austin Rivers, who wants him for $13 million? The only person of value that I see on that team is Kelly Oubre.
Okay, yeah.
Beal because he's being appropriately played for the quality player that he is.
Yep.
Right? Otto Porter could be a $25 million a year player, but he hasn't had the opportunity to play under the coaching and the leadership of the Washington Wizards. Right?
That might be a hot take that he's worth $25 million. That's a lot of money.
I mean, they paid him for a reason. Listen, you're thinking about this season. You think about the 2 seasons prior.
And last year.
No, you think about the reason he was paid $26 million.
People thought that he got that contract. People thought that was a big contract at the time. The only reason he got it is because the Kings sent him a big offer sheet, and he was valuable enough to the Wizards for them to match it.
He's a good defender. He's their best three-point shooter. He's got length. He has talent. He's underutilized. The players that I think that have value, the only player that I think that has value besides Bradley Beal, is Marcus Morris, or is it Markieff Morris?
Markieff.
It's Markieff. It's Markieff Morris. He's still able to produce. He's probably the best, the best reserve player that they have on the team, or if he's starting,
he starts
the
at
best
the
starter.
Yeah,
okay, but he
role
probably
player.
should be a reserve. He's a role player. He's the best role player that they have on the team. Him and Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre, of course, in the 1 year contract. The rest of the guys. I mean, I'm looking at this as another NBA team, and I don't want anything to do with the Washington Wizards. I'm sorry, unless you're giving me a couple of garbage players to dump after I receive them in a package deal with Bradley Beal. My head's turned the other way.
I want some Satoransky on the Toronto Raptors. Anyways, Ryker, we've gone for 24 minutes here. I'm of the stance I don't want to completely blow up our team for Bradley Beal. While you say if the right deal happens, you'd like to see him on our roster. That might be because I know Bradley Beal's a phenomenal player, but he's hurt the Raptors too much to see me rock our uniform. Any closing words on the Raptors possibly making a trade with Washington?
You put too much pressure on me with the closing words. Any closing words from you on this potential trade?
All I have to say, Bradley Beal's really good, and if we could snipe him on the Raptors, I'd put my pain of the past he's caused my soul aside, and I'd cheer for him. But, people of the podcast know Bradley Beal hurts me.
That's it.
Weird ending. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, all that random stuff. If you made it this far, 24 minutes in, you're the best. You're the GOAT. Leave a comment, like the video.
Listen, if you've made it to the end, comment your name and we'll shout you out in the next podcast because I will be thoroughly impressed. So for real, if you've made it this far, comment your name and we will say it.
All right. Get those shout outs. You're the best. Follow us on Instagram.
Cheers.